Let's go now to Andrew Clennell, who's joined by the New South Wales Premier.
Yes, the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns. Thanks for joining us this chilly Sunday morning, Premier. I feel a bit with the events in federal parliament of this week that it's overshadowed a bit what is this shocking bus crash at Greeter. I wanted to ask you about this. We've seen many young people die, a mother and daughter die. What do you have to say about the effect of this accident on the Hunter Valley, the state and the country?
Yeah, a few things, Andrew. Firstly, in relation to the Hunter Valley, it's a tight-knit community, particularly around Cessnock and Singleton. And in communities like that, often emergency service workers will go to an accident or an emergency and they'll personally know the people involved, which I think adds to the trauma the community's feeling today and over the last week. The converse of that, of course, is that because they all know each other, they can lean on each other, and that's exactly what's happening. You've seen Singleton in particular come together after many residents have been killed as a result of this terrible tragedy, which is part and parcel of what you see in regional New South Wales. We've got to be there for them in the coming weeks because it's going to be very difficult.
Have you had a chance to talk to relatives of the victims?
Not directly, no. I've spoken to some of the survivors in hospital, and I've spoken to some of the people that were on the bus. Obviously, they're going through a very traumatic last few weeks, and the reason for that clearly is that so many people associate the Hunter Valley with a lot of happiness and joy. Many people across the country have gone there for a destination wedding, and these people were doing the right thing, particularly the bride and groom, Andrew, who put on a bus for their guests so that they didn't drink and drive or weren't even tempted to drink and drive. And I think that in some ways compounds the terrible tragedy we've seen.
I know you're limited about what you can say about this, but we've had the driver arrested and the bus company concerned raided. What have you heard from police about what happened last Sunday night?
Yeah, look, it's difficult for me to comment directly. There's an ongoing police inquiry and investigation. Charges have been laid. But look, what I will say is that we will look for the critical incident report from New South Wales Police. We'll make changes to the law when those report recommendations are given to the New South Wales government. We want to make sure people are safe. Obviously, there'll be a coronial inquiry too, and if changes to the law or regulations are required to keep people safe, that's exactly what we'll do.
And I guess the obvious one when you mention that comes to mind is more mandatory seatbelt wearing on coaches and buses and the like. Is that likely?
Well, there's a couple of things about that, and I think the message does need to go out since you've asked, and that is in New South Wales, if you are on a bus or a coach that has seatbelts, you are legally required to wear them. That's the law of the land in this state. Secondly, there's a distinction between regional buses and metro buses. The main reason for that is that areas that aren't serviced by heavy public transport and need to use buses often have people standing in the aisles to get off and on in a quicker way. I don't want to announce policy changes that are impractical or can't be implemented quickly, so I'm going to wait for those reports to come back, but we're looking at the space very closely.
Anything in the criminal space, penalties for drivers or anything of that nature that you're looking at or might look at?
I'm not... Well, I mean, you'd be aware that the individual involved is facing very serious charges already, and obviously if the critical incident report from New South Wales Police comes back to the government, we'll look at those potential changes as well.
It feels like you've had a rough time in office dealing with several tragedies already in your time as Premier. I mean, a paramedic got murdered. I think you posted the other day his wife's had a child. Are these things getting to you? I know the fires and floods hit politicians in the last New South Wales government pretty hard.
Well, look, I think it is part of the job, Andrew, and, you know, when you speak to, as you just mentioned, Stephen Toga's family and see their dedication to their family and also the years of effort that Stephen put into being a paramedic in New South Wales, to be honest with you, it's a huge privilege to be around that kind of level of service. Even seeing emergency service workers up in Newcastle, one of the first crews on site was a retained fire station, so they're part-time firefighters. They were on site, they were the first fire crew on site. So that's about 4 or 5 dads that work at the local fire station in Branxton. doing their bit for the local community. I think it's just a reminder of what we've got in Australia, just wonderful people that are prepared to go above and beyond and treat a complete stranger as if they were a family member and give them real care and empathy and support.
And coming from an ex-firefighter yourself. Now, I wanted to ask now about the social housing announcement by the Prime Minister yesterday. Do you welcome this? Is it enough?
We do welcome it. It's $600 million for New South Wales for social housing across the state. Welcome and desperately needed in New South Wales. You'd know, Andrew, that we're likely to fall 30,000 houses short or homes short over the next 12 months. And then the 12 months after that and the 12 months after that, we've got a severe housing shortage in the state, both public, social, and of course in the private market as well. So we have to be making sure that this policy initiative, as well as many others, are pursued, because we can't have a situation where more inbound immigrants are coming to Australia's largest state, putting more pressure on the housing market, and the New South Wales government standing flat-footed.
Is there enough construction labour in New South Wales to build enough housing, social housing in particular?
There is going to be skills and supply crunches, particularly in the labour market, but that's not an excuse to stop it. I've been assured by developers and builders in New South Wales that there's enough private capital ready to roll in the state. You'd be aware that in New South Wales we've been hampered, I think, by planning regimes from the state and local government that really stop infill and urban consolidation in Sydney in particular, which is putting enormous pressure on the housing market. When you've got rents going up by 24% in just a 12-month period, well, 10 years ago people were saying, will I ever be able to afford a house in Sydney? Now people are saying, can I even rent a place in the city?
Well,
and that's
just
intolerable for young people.
Just to that, what are you doing in terms of zoning changes or planning to do?
Yeah, we've commissioned the Greater Sydney Commission to look at rebalancing where Sydney's population growth goes over the next 5 years, and that means rebalancing it closer to the CBD, closer to centres of employment, particularly Parramatta and the city. And if you look at the population growth targets from the previous government, it was all centred along the western fringe of Sydney, almost adding another street to our western fringe every other week. But that sprawl makes it impossible to run and manage a modern city like Sydney. And I don't think people genuinely want to grow a city like that. So if we are going to have inbound immigration, and it's not possible, and we don't want to say Sydney's full, we want to welcome people to this great city, we have to provide more density in Sydney and provide the changing to the planning laws to see that happen.
I just want to ask you about something I asked you about before the election, in fact. You made what is a controversial decision to scale back these sports active vouchers and means test them. Do you fear this could prevent the middle class getting their kids healthy? I mean, it sort of taps out at a household income of $156K. That could be a teacher, a nurse struggling with Sydney rents or mortgages. Do you have any concerns about that means test level? Why have you decided to press ahead with it?
Well, look, we do have concerns, and in a perfect world, of course, we wouldn't be scaling back that program. Obviously, I'm acutely aware that people right across New South Wales are doing it tough on a whole range of income levels, particularly with rents and mortgages. The reason we've had to make this decision, and we'll have to make other decisions about spending, is that we've got $187 billion worth of debt, which is the largest figure ever recorded in New South Wales. We've had the largest deficit ever recorded in New South Wales, and we've got about $7 billion worth of spending that doesn't have any budget attached to it from the previous government. So I'd love to keep that program going in its original incarnation, but it's not a case that I would be in a situation where I'm cutting this program and I can bank the savings. Because no money was allocated to it at all, I would have to find $800 million to keep it going. And I think the fairest thing to do was to means test it, put it in the budget, make it permanent, so that sporting teams and families can at least organise their lives around it and have some certainty.
Has the PM or Federal Treasurer to you or your Treasurer asked you for spending restraint?
Look, I'm not sure of a direct request, but I'm aware that given the real pressure on the economy when it comes to inflation, and then inflation's obvious impact on interest rates and that squeeze on the family budget, every government's got a responsibility to look out for spending, and particularly spending that can hit the economy in inflationary ways. I mean, to put this in perspective, Andrew, in order to keep active kids going, I would have to borrow money. Now, the people that would have to pay off that debt are ironically the same children who would be eligible to apply for active kids today, and that's no way to run a state budget.
All right. Now, you kind of indicated coming into office you would lift public service wages. The HSU wants 6.5%. You're offering 4.5%. And they are going to strike because you promised, or they say Labor promised, to take this condition out of salary packaging for hospital cleaners, paramedics and the like, where you have to pay 50% of what you save to the New South Wales government. Are you delivering on your promises here, or are you failing to deliver on them?
Well, we believe we are delivering on them. I mean, there's 430,000 public servants in New South Wales. It's the biggest employer in the state and one of the biggest in the country. And obviously we're dealing with all departments and public sector unions and have done since we've been elected. We believe we've made good progress, not just on pay, but also on conditions for teachers and for nurses and for public sector workers. For paramedics and health workers in New South Wales, we are locked in a negotiation with their union. We want to sit down and make sure that we can make headway, but obviously we're constrained by the budget situation that we've been left. We've got, as I said, $180 billion worth of debt. We have to manage that alongside retaining public sector workers. It's not an easy task, but for the vast majority of public sector unions and their workers, we've made real progress.
You say you're in negotiations. I've been told neither you nor Daniel Mookie has spoken to the HSU leader, Gerard Hayes, for months, or certainly many weeks. So has it broken down a bit?
No, that's not right. We have spoken to the Secretary of the Union, and look, I just say I'm not going to knock him. He's got every right to fight for his members, and I expect him to do that. And in many ways, we want to make sure that when we're sitting around the negotiating table, all our cards are on the table, and we can get a lasting agreement between public sector workers and unions and the New South Wales government. As I said, I didn't predict it would be a smooth road. I knew that it would be rocky, but I think if you look at it in aggregate across all public sector workers, across all departments, we've made real progress. Indeed, we've busted the wages cap, we've removed that, and we've offered a genuine pay increase for public sector workers in the state to retain them and keep them in the system.